Yes.
I'm just picking up on the frank discussions. Another country you had frank discussions with last week was Russia. And I wondered if you had any readouts on the meetings today of Assistant Secretary Victoria Nuland in Moscow, which obviously comes hot on the heels of those visits the visit by Secretary Kerry and his talks with President Putin last week.
Well, Assistant Secretary Nuland was in Moscow. She's on her way back now, if I understand correctly, and she was there to discuss the next steps in implementing the Minsk agreements, and these follow on, of course, to the Secretary's meetings May 12th in Sochi. The United States is actively engaged in deepening our engagement and our support for seeing Minsk fully implemented in all of its aspects, including a full ceasefire, increased humanitarian assistance and access, control and monitoring of the international border, and free, fair local elections in eastern Ukraine. Of course, after the meeting with NATO foreign ministers in Antalya, Assistant Secretary Nuland went to Kiev, where she had meetings with the full range of the Ukrainian political leadership, and then went from there to Moscow. So she's been actively engaged over the last week to try to move Minsk forward. We don't have breakthroughs to report, but this is continued active engagement to try to push forward the discussions that the Secretary had in Sochi.
Within Moscow today.
Let me check and see if I can get a name for you. I don't have a name in front of me.
What would be your what would the deepening U.S. engagement in implementing Minsk look like? What exactly, concretely, are you thinking of doing? Because she did say actually afterwards, she talked to some journalists. She said we talked about concrete steps. What might those be?
Well, the United States' focus from the outset of the crisis in Ukraine has been to support Ukraine and to pursue a diplomatic solution that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. We remain in close contact with our European allies and partners, as well as with countries around the world to help accomplish this. That's I don't have specific steps to read out from her meetings. Again, this is we don't see this as a breakthrough. We see this as continued active engagement to try to move Minsk forward.
You guys aren't actually part. The United States is not actually part of the Normandy process. That's been led by France and Germany at the moment with Russia and Ukraine. Would you see some kind of involvement, some deeper engagement in that process on the U.S. side?
Well, I think regardless of format, what we're talking about is the U.S. Engagement to support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. I don't have a format announcement or preference to spell out right here, though. Same topic.
No.
Anything else? Anything else on? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Secretary Kerry has been harangued by a number of think tankers and critics about the meeting in Russia. What is the State Department's response? The general criticism being that this was a gift to Putin, and the way that it's being interpreted in Russia is a sign of how important Russia is on the world stage, and how people must come to Sochi and meet with the president, or with the premier.
Well, I think you meant with the president.
Yeah.
So, I think the purpose of the trip to Sochi was to speak directly to the top decision maker in Russia about a number of issues, including Ukraine, and to express clearly the U.S. view with regard to Ukraine, to talk about the consequences for failure to implement Minsk. And so it was a valuable opportunity for that reason, and that's also why Assistant Secretary Nuland has been so actively engaged in the week following his trip to Sochi. We think it's always good to express that view directly and clearly, and the Secretary went right afterwards to talk to his NATO foreign minister counterparts, as well as with his Ukrainian counterparts to make that clear to them as well.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Sorry, Michelle. I believe the last time Secretary Nuland was actually Assistant Secretary Nuland, was actually in Moscow. Dates back to late 2013, before Crimea and before the Eastern Ukrainian crisis. So, should we? Do you, as an administration, or does this building believe that the Secretary Kerry's visit actually achieved some kind of slight détente in the tensions that you have seen up until this point?
Well, the purpose was to focus on specific areas where we believe we can work together. We're not describing it in that kind of general term that you used. So that's why there was a discussion of Ukraine, as we talked about, also Syria, also Iran. Important areas where we need to work together. We're not giving it a label broader than that. Same topic.
Yeah, I think the goal wasn't to ease tensions then.
I think the goal was to focus on specific topics where we need to work together, or where we need to see greater action.
Do you see that now happening? The fact that Assistant Secretary Nuland, 18 months on, has now gone back to Moscow. Does that signal some kind of easing in these tensions?
Well, and she was in Kyiv right before she went to Moscow. So I think our focus on Ukraine's sovereignty and its territorial integrity it remains as it has ever been. So if you mean to suggest by easing some sort of retreat from our policy and our view about Ukraine, then no.
I meant to suggest that. The United States and Russia now find themselves in a position where they are at least able to talk about this in some kind of fashion, rather than having to meet in Europe.
Well, this is not the first time we've talked about it.
No, but it is the first time that she's been back to Moscow, and it's probably only the first time that you've actually talked in Moscow about this issue at that level for some time.
Possibly, although the Secretary has talked with Foreign Minister Lavrov numerous times over the last months, including about Ukraine. So I don't think I agree with the premise that there has been an absence of communication on Ukraine. It's important that Assistant Secretary Nuland is in Moscow to continue this discussion, especially following right on Sochi. But I think that's.
Clearly, there's been an attempt to change the tone of the conversation. I mean, the Secretary was almost effusive in his thanks to President Putin for hosting him and for having these serious conversations. So, I mean, it's not clearly an attempt to change the tone and to ease tensions and to find progress, even if you don't retreat on Ukraine?
Well, we think it's important to keep up the dialogue. We have some shared interests with Russia when we talk about the Iran nuclear negotiations. We have some areas where we disagree, as with Ukraine, and then there are other areas where we want to see if there's the opportunity to work, more effectively together, such as Syria. But again, I'm not going to.
Did the Secretary thank President Putin so much in the press conference in Moscow? What was the goal of that? Was he just really thankful?
I don't have further analysis to do about his word choice in the press avail. I think we need to keep moving because we're going to run out of time.
I got a quick one.
Yeah.
North Korea.
Yeah.